All right, guys, just want to welcome back to the Everything Cultural Podcast. Today, we're doing a preview and prediction for Week 7 contest between Oklahoma and Texas. The Red River Showdown has arrived. This one will be going down in the Cotton Bowl at Dallas, 3:30 p.m. Eastern Time on ABC. Longhorns, 3.5-point favorites, 42.5 is the total. Anything started with that Sooner offense on the Texas defense. And obviously, the biggest headline here is that John Mateer is doubtful following wrist surgery just a couple of weeks ago. He's going to be back here soon, but unlikely to be playing in this contest. And that's why the Longhorns are favored, in my opinion. They're going to be turning to Michael Hawkins, who ended up getting started in this game a season ago. And it went as bad as you could think. They were unable to sustain much offense, especially through the air, and are out to a 34-3 loss. His legs also were not much of a factor, and that's really what he shines with. He has a lot of toughness. He's a pretty good runner. Got the start here against Temple. 162 yards on 58% and 3 scores through the air. They ended up also adding a rushing touchdown as well. This is a guy that you're going to look to do kind of the similar, approach of last year, right? And that's get his legs involved, get him out of the pocket. That's going to be utilizing his strength. But in terms of downfield throwing, it's certainly probably not going to be very optimal for Oklahoma in this game. Hawkins, I didn't think was all that good last year. And of course, he was a very young quarterback. Ben Arbuckle is now the offensive coordinator. I'm sure they've done some good prep work to make sure he's in a much better scenario than he was a season ago when he was kind of thrown to the Wolves. This is a guy that you saw put his body out on the line, though, show elusiveness as a runner, has added some size. So he can certainly take those hits a little bit more. But I think Mateer being out is obviously going to be a significant problem. That guy is an incredible playmaker. As the heart and soul of this football team, he could really do it all by himself, but I don't think Hawkins has that same capability. This is a rushing attack for Oklahoma that is not very strong, and it wasn't last year. And even though it's showcased some improvements this season, it really has not been much of a factor because Mateer has really been carving them up when it comes to opponents giving up production. Against Auburn, they only had 32 rushing yards, and even against Kent State, only a buck 85 on 41 attempts. The offensive line has improved; it's better than last year's group, which was one of the worst in CFB. But I'm really not convinced that these tackles, led by Logan Howland on the left side and then Derek Simmons at the right side, are going to be all that great for them. I think center Jake Makua has been great for Oklahoma this year. This is a group that seems like it's going to be at a significant disadvantage against a Texas defense. It's coming off a tough game against Florida. The Gators were able to finally get things going after underachieving for many weeks so far this year. This is still a phenomenal group, though, of great size and depth. Colin Simmons was a big playmaker last week. Hero Kanu has been solid on the interior. Murad Wilson, Cole Brevard, Travis Shaw still have a tremendous amount of size. You also have Ethan Burke coming off the other edge rushing spot, been able to get some pressure this season. So this is still a great group on the defensive line. I think they have a great edge when it comes to this O-line. In the middle of the defense, Leano Lafau has really taken his game to another level. I think Ty Anthony Smith, he's been an elite run defender so far this year. And these guys have probably been better than Anthony Hill, who is still one of the best linebackers in football with his athletic ability and his skills as a patroller, a guy that can make a lot of different things happen at the line of scrimmage and in coverage. So this linebacking group has been playing outstanding this year. And then mainly the secondary looking for a bounce back after a disappointing game where they were just getting cooked by those Florida wide receivers. Jalen Gilbew struggled. Not as bad as Kobe Black, though. Malik Muhammad, you're hoping, is going to be able to return for this game. They could certainly use his services as a multi-year starter in the secondary. Michael Taft is still tremendous at safety. This is probably the best player on their defense collectively. He does a lot of great things against the run. He's phenomenal back in coverage. The football IQ on him is just incredibly outstanding. And then Jelani McDonald alongside him has played very well. And you also have a newcomer to this roster, Grayson Littleton, who's played quite well in the slot. And I think with Mateer being out, that just gives this receiving room less opportunities to thrive. Keontez Lewis, he's going to be questionable for this game after an unfortunate injury against Kent. Deion Burks, this is a guy they've been trying to kind of force feed the football to, and his production this year isn't all that great. 275 yards, had a 100-yard game against Michigan. Since then, though, he's been incredibly quiet. They've not been able to get him in open space as much as they would like. Jaron Kanik has been a great emergence coming down from linebacker to tight end. He's been making some incredible catches down the seams. He's a great blocker as well. Even if his production isn't all that eye-shattering at the end of this game, his impact will be felt. But he was big for them. 60 straight. He had 4 straight games of 60-plus yards to start the year. It was pretty quiet last week against a weaker opponent. Isaiah Satanga actually leads this team in receiving with 3 touchdowns and 359 yards. That's pretty much going to be it. You got these 3 guys you're looking to, which I think is good enough against most opponents with Mateer throwing the football. But with Hawkins, he's going to need some help. That's going to include getting Deion Burks involved in a versatile role. Collectively, I just think this is going to be a problem with Michael Hawkins at quarterback. But again, I think there is a little bit of hope. I'm giving it a sliver or two because Ben Arbuckle, the offensive coordinator, is going to come in and he's going to tailor this offense around his skill set. And obviously, he's done that tremendously with John Mateer the last couple of years. But I think Oklahoma's probably going to struggle on the offensive side of the ball. Move to the other side of things, the Longhorn offense on that Sooner defense. And this is where Oklahoma can hang and make this one dirty and very gritty. I think for Texas, this is an offense I expected to struggle in the first month of the season, but I think now as we start to get into the meat of conference play, it might start to draw red flags on how they've not been able to be very consistent at really anything. The run game was non-existent against Florida. The passing attack never once has really showcased a whole lot of efficiency. What's his name? Ryan Wingo and Arch Manning. Those two guys have not been on the same page much this year. They were finally able to hook up on a post route into the end zone against Florida. That was nice to see. But for the most part, their timing has just been abysmal. They're going to be facing an Oklahoma secondary that I think is the clear biggest weakness on this defense. If you can find one, it is an elite group. But the secondary, I think, still is going to have some problems, especially against a talented receiving group. Cortland Gilroy, Gentry Williams, the starting corners, Devon Jordan. All three of these guys have not exactly been standoutish at any spot. Reggie Powers in the slot has played pretty well, but mainly against the run. I think Kendall Daniels is a nice Swiss Army knife of this defense. They're going to get him involved in a variety of different ways if they can. I think that Robert Spears Jennings, though, is really your tone setter at safety. This is a guy that can come downhill in a hurry and make a lot of big plays. He's also a bit of a ball hawk as well. Him and Peyton Bowen have been the standouts there at safety. So, I don't know if they're going to be able to rip off big plays in the run game. That being Texas, and I don't know if things are going to be available for playing a lot of two safety looks, but in terms of man coverage, I think Texas certainly will have an advantage. The rest of the receiving group hasn't been all that ideal. DeAndre Morris had opportunities. They've just not been able to capitalize on them. Jack Andrews only has 9 receptions on the year. Parker Livingstone, their freshman, he's been sensational for them. He's going to be questionable for this one. Should be good to go. Suffered a bit of an awkward leg injury, though, against Florida. Emmett Mosley, he hasn't been around much this year. They've not been able to get many other guys to step up. So it's really just been those top 3 guys. And, it'd be nice to see a little bit more of this depth be able to provide. But we just got to get in sync of our top guys first before we can do that. So the Texas passing attack has been really sluggish. Arch Manning's made some questionable decisions coming off a 2-interception game against Florida. He's been really inconsistent. And this is a guy that a lot of people, of course, were raving coming into the year. I pumped the brakes on that immediately. I felt like with these new receivers, a new offensive line, his first year as a starter, it would be tough for him, and it would take a while to get in sync. So I still think he's an incredibly talented player. He showcased that against Florida. He made a lot of plays, especially late in that game, on the run, throwing downfield, giving his receivers a chance, and they were able to hook up and generate some offense big time there, which gave him a chance to potentially win the game. He ended the day with 263 and 2 touchdowns. Arch, of course, is tremendous of his legs. As I just alluded to, not just on the run, but when it comes to picking up yards and chunks, $160 and 5 scores for him, both of which lead the team, which is a little bit concerning. But they've been battling some injuries in this backfield. Jarrett Gibson, C.J. Baxter, Contravian Wisner. I mean, they're hoping they can be all hands on deck at some point. Wisner did come back against Florida and had a touchdown, but was not able to do really much of anything in that game in terms of effectiveness. He does have great dual threat capabilities, though. He actually had 2 touchdowns because he had one receiving as well. So he was effective. He just wasn't efficient, is the best way to put it. This is a very good backfield when healthy. The run game, I think, against Ohio State week 1 was pretty impressive. They were able to get downhill and stay ahead of the sticks often. They just could not execute, a whole lot on 3rd down. Of course, when they got in the goal line area, the Buckeyes shut him down. So this is an offensive line, or an offense that is, that's really been struggling to find, rhythm and an identity, really. Left tackle Trevor Gooseby, as we look at the offensive front now, I think is tremendous. Right tackle Brandon Baker coming off a tough effort. This is a group that had a lot of false starts against Florida. He's also had 7 penalties this year over at right tackle, so some things they definitely need to clean up. And this interior has not really been overwhelming. Also had a DJ Campbell, Cole Hudson, a multi-year player of this program, is not really stepping up at center. So I think there could be some issues against the elite defensive line. I felt like it was one of the best groups coming into the year up front for OU. R. Mason Thomas coming off the edge is so good. I think this guy's got great explosion, and he's been an elite pass rusher to start the year. Marvin Jones Jr. has been pretty respectable coming off the other side. David Stone, Grayson Halton, Dom Williams, Jaden Jackson. I mean, they're just loaded with an abundance of size here on the interior. I think this is a group that has a lot of depth, a lot of rotation. Both Jackson and Williams did not play against Kent State. They were just trying to hold them out to get them 100% for this contest. And this is, a tougher matchup for them compared to what the Longhorns have for their defensive line. But I think this is one they're equally going to eat in as well. And then the linebacking group is still coming along very well for Oklahoma, led by Kip Lewis. I think for Texas, you got to continue to play your offense. That's going to be trick plays, variation of different runs when it comes to being physical downhill, and then trying to attack vertically and downfield. A lot of spacing on those routes when it comes to generating yards, 15, 20 yards in the air, I think is really where they can thrive because they do have those playmakers. But I think at some point they might just have to go back to the basics, a quick passing attack, utilize Arch's legs a ton, and I think that's one thing you'll see is a lot of read option game, a lot of QB powers to loosen up this D line and try to develop some type of play action. I think that potentially might work for them. Looking at the final thoughts in the prediction, this is an interesting game, and obviously it sucks that John Mateer is not going to be playing. This is my favorite rivalry in college football over the last 10 years. Every single game outside of like 2 or 3 have been very competitive, very close, very wacky finishes, crazy comebacks, a lot of points. I mean, you've seen that a lot over the last couple of years. Last season was tough as they had issues at quarterback. They got blown out like 49-0 a couple years ago as all the healthy quarterbacks were unavailable, or there was no healthy quarterbacks, that is, for Oklahoma. Other than that, this is an incredible rivalry. It's always back and forth. There's always something on the line, it seems, more than so than just bragging rights. Right here, Texas, who's now unranked after starting the year, is the AP number 1, can get back in the win column and knock Oklahoma from its number 6 spot. I think that's great, and I think for Texas, they're going to win this game mainly just because Mateer is out. If he was playing, I would certainly feel different. I still may even pick Texas because they badly need a win right here, and I think they're going to get the job done. I think you're going to see the offense have more efficiency. They're going to do better when it comes to running the football, which will be hard against this D line. It's not going to be overwhelming by any means, but they'll do well enough, led by Arch's legs, and I think they'll do well when it comes to attacking that secondary downfield. That does seem like it's growing. I know against Florida it was tough, and they waited till the second half, really the fourth quarter, to get things going. I just think this Texas defense is still tremendous. They had a tough effort against Florida, but they were coming off a bye week, and they've been underachieving for weeks. It was time for them to finally take back and get some of theirs going on offense. So I'm not going to hold that too much against the Longhorns, even though they did get bodied up front. That's not gonna happen here against Oklahoma. I'm not a believer in that offensive line. That run game's not all that good, and I think with Hawkins at quarterback, it's going to be very hard for them to win this game. But if Texas, ends up turning the ball over a couple of times, Sooners will probably win. This is going to be a low-scoring affair. I'm going to take Texas to cover in this one. It's going to be another great game, I would assume, as it always is. That's going to be it for today's episode. Make sure you guys like, comment, subscribe. See you next time.